Welcome back, class. Today I want to talk about naming simple organic compounds. So these are compounds that we're not going to see a whole lot in this course, but we may see them in examples, and you're probably familiar with quite a few of them from everyday life. And so I thought it worthwhile just to talk about naming some very simple types of these compounds. So if you look at the table here, we can look at what are called hydrocarbons, right? So these are the types of compounds that we're going to make or name, and these are compounds that contain only carbon and hydrogen. Now, where the differences come and why we name these differently has to do with a couple of factors. One of them is how many carbons they have, and do they have multiple bonds? Meaning, do they have a double bond or a triple bond in them? And the basic pattern we're going to follow is that the base name of the compound is going to be determined by the number of carbons, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the ending or the suffix of the name is going to be determined by if there are multiple bonds and what type of multiple bond there is. So let's look at the prefixes first. So similar to what we did when we had molecular compounds, we have a set of prefixes. So now these are slightly different. So the prefix meth equals 1, eth equals 2, prop is 3, but is 4, and pent is 5, and we got hex is 6, and hept is 7, oct is 8, non is 9, and dec is 10. So some of these might be familiar, others you might not quite be familiar with, but these are the prefixes that we're going to use. And so let's look at this first compound here. Now, another thing that we might get used to is that a lot of times when we write out these hydrocarbons, we use a lot of shorthand, right? So we just simply write out the carbon chain. So each of these points of the line, so here, 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 and here, represents a carbon atom. Now, we also don't show any of the hydrogens. But so if we were to write this out in a more full context here, this compound would look like this. We would have first carbon would have 3 hydrogens, because everything is going to have 4 bonds to it here. And then this one would have 2 carbons. This one would have 2 carbons. This one would have 2 carbons. And the last one would again have 3 carbons. So the formula here would actually be C5H12. But we abbreviate it with this simple line drawing, right? We do a lot of abbreviations in chemistry and organic chemistry specifically. But back to the name now. So the carbon chain, right, the number of carbons here is 5. So that's going to lead us to have a pent prefix. And the suffix is going to be determined again by the multiple bonds. And the 3 possibilities are we can have an ANE, and this is only single bonds, right? So no double bonds. We could have an ENE ending, and this means we have a double bond. And we could have a YNE ending, and that means we have a triple bond. So since we have all single bonds, the suffix is going to be just the ANE, and so this compound would simply be known as pentane. Let's look at the second example here. So if we count up the number of carbons, we have 1, 2, 3. And you might wonder why I've numbered it backwards. Well, traditionally, if we have a multiple bond, then we give that the lowest number. So if the double bond is over here, we start with the 1 over here. And so the numbers around the multiple bond are lower. But we have 3, so that's going to make my ending be a, write this down, right? It's going to be prop. Right, that's my 3 carbon. And since it has a double bond, I'm going to have an ene ending. So it's going to be propene is going to be the name of this compound. Now, not in this book, but you may also see this compound, or you may also see it could also be named as 1-propene. And that's because the double bond is at the 1 position here. But for our purposes, propene is perfectly fine. So we need, as long as we can know the number of carbons, and know our prefix, and then determine what the ending is going to be by looking at the double bond, the type of bonding, then we can name these simple hydrocarbons pretty easily. So if we look back at the table here, we can see some of these more common ones, and you've come across these in lots of different ways, right? So methane, propane, butane, these are all basic types of fuel, right? Whether they're used in natural gas, right? So heating your house, a propane used in gas grills, butane is common in things like lighters. We can have some ones that have double bonds like ethene, right? Which is put out by fruit when it ripens. You could have triple bonds, ethyne, right, which looks like this, and this is used in welding, right? So a lot of these different hydrocarbons we play, and some other ones that aren't put here, things like, well, pentane and octane, hexane. These are parts of gasoline and different oils and solvents that we come across. So now you know how to name simple hydrocarbon organic compounds. Well, that brings Chapter 3 to an end. So next time we will start up with Chapter 4. Make sure that you're watching the other videos that go along with these class lectures to get some other information and some different perspectives on the same information.